What's up, everybody? Welcome to my conversation with the amazing cellist and wonderful colleague ALBAN GERHARDT. ALBAN, as all of you know, is not only a wonderful interpreter of the classical repertoire, but he is a huge proponent of new music and has helped create an absolutely outstanding catalog of new works over the last years. And I highly recommend that you check out, for example, his recording of the Unzuqin cello concerto, among many others. His recordings are wonderful and are a huge inspiration to me. What also inspired me very much is that ALBAN has recently joined Patreon, and I highly recommend that you check out his Patreon and become a patron of his, because ALBAN is sharing really great insights on his way of cello playing, on his way of practicing, on his way of learning new repertoire, and this is a huge source of information. And as we are in the cycle of masterclasses at the moment, this is actually where I draw inspiration from, and I'm sure you will as well. So ALBAN and I sat down virtually and we talked about his Patreon. We talked about what it is like to be a traveling musician at the moment, or a musician at all. And I really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you do too. Here it is. Thank you for joining us. ALBAN GERHARDT, it's an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time. That's super nice.
Pleasure talking to you, Johannes.
ALBAN, I originally contacted you because I saw that you started working at Patreon, and that is something that I want to go more in depth with you, especially in the bigger context of what is music worth at the moment and what is art worth at the moment, and how do we express ourselves in the current climate. But first of all, we're finding you in Darmstadt and you are playing again. So tell us about that. That's exciting.
Well, I was supposed to play this huge piece by Brett Dean with far too many people on stage, and they asked me if I would switch it to something smaller, which they could then play more often in social distancing. So instead of 2 times Brett Dean, I'm playing 9 times Haydn D major. And unfortunately, I have agreed to also play some Bach suites. So today is actually the worst day of doing that as well. But it feels actually very weird. I mean, I have played, like probably you not, but I have played in my life in front of 2-3 people. I remember. So I have done that before, playing in front of an empty hall. But such a big hall, that empty, it takes some time to get used to. So always the first couple of minutes I feel rather insecure until I get the hang of it. Especially you can make out every single face. That's a bit annoying.
Exactly. So the anonymity of the audience disappears and you see sort of individual contacts more, right?
Absolutely. And that is rather disturbing for me. I mean, I don't know about you, but I normally have glasses, or actually I haven't had glasses in a year. I use contacts. But for concerts, I take them out because I like the anonymity. So I get most nervous when I play at home, when I know my father is there and old teachers and stuff. But if I travel away from home, actually I don't get that nervous because I don't know those people anyway. So if they hate me or love me, I don't really care anymore.
It's interesting that you're going through this now, because in 2 weeks I'm doing the same thing. So I agreed to, as you did, to turn something that was supposed to be bigger formats into something without wins, and to play it 9 times because that's how many subscribers they have. So you get 100 people at a time. Now, I don't know how it is in your case, and I'm saying this without complaints, but I do see that this is a fact. I'm playing 9 concerts for the fee of 1 concert. And I understand that orchestras right now are not earning the same amount like they usually do and all that, and maybe the support is not as big. But if I go to my doctor and I say, hey, sorry, I really, I'm having a hard time right now because I don't really get paid, and it's Corona times, I can only pay you 20% for this operation of my leg, the doctor will maybe not agree. In your opinion, where do we find ourselves as artists in this moment when it comes to sustaining a life and sustaining a business?
Well, I think both of us, we talk from a very privileged situation, because the way how fees are distributed rather unevenly. So if I think of myself, I don't care if I play 10 times for the fee of 1. I think still it's plenty what we earn. But I think of somebody like my sister who plays mainly modern music and where the fees are much lower. To force them to play 10 times for the fee of one, that's ridiculous, because then they end up with a lesser than a cleaning woman fee. So for freelance musicians who don't have the great chance, or not even chance, but the blessing of having an easy career like us, where money is being poured into, I don't know, well, that's another subject, I guess, but these people who really suffer making a living suddenly being cut in half, that's brutal. And I think in Germany they handle it quite well, but I see in other countries where it completely falls apart.
Well, it raises the question for me, what is the relevance of art when sort of the necessity of putting bread on the table, or the necessity of having a doctor, or the necessity of keeping public transport going, like what role does art play? Is art just a luxury when everything is sort of happy and we all have a good going economy, or is there something to be said for relevance also in times when the chips are down?
Well, you're the prime example of doing a lot of stuff outside of the normal path of playing music. So all the outreach you have done, it shows that, I mean, we have to do that to show that we are much more relevant than just a little luxury. And in times like that, I think it's incredibly important that we do anything it takes to make ourselves relevant. And so that's why I wouldn't even mind to play for the next few years 10 times more for the same fee, as long as it's really 10 times more. Because if we play very little and then get paid the same fees, then it would probably be a little too little. The governments are just trying to pour money in to keep the countries running somehow. Art is just part of it, and obviously we are important, but unfortunately we are not as relevant and important as a doctor or a nurse or even the supermarket cashier. And I just had that discussion with my wife, whose orchestra in Madrid, the orchestra of the Teatro Real, they're restarting the season now with 27 performances of La Traviata in July. And some musicians are very scared and they think it shouldn't be like that. And what if they get sick? Well, and I say, well, if you want to be relevant, you have to take that into account. Nobody asks the nurse if she wants to work because she might get sick. And in Spain, I think 50% of the nurses got sick. We have to put our lives then also on the line and not say, oh no, we must not get sick. No, this virus is not Ebola. So the chances that we get sick is not immediately a death sentence. And that's why I wouldn't even mind in playing in hospitals or really endangering myself, because for me, the most important thing is to show that live music really matters. And the whole streaming, that's nice and fine, but I haven't, maybe you can explain to me, I haven't seen the benefit of streaming, because then I might as well just go to a wonderful performance I want to see and not just something, because for me it's the same. Somebody on the screen plays, if it's right now or 10 years ago or 100 years ago, that doesn't do a big difference to me. I love to hear music live in the room, and I like to feel and get the personality, and especially when there are other people listening as well. So, and this might be something we'll be missing for a long time to come, I'm afraid.
It is exactly what you said in the beginning is what struck a chord with me when you said you only see very few people scattered around. This sort of density of a concert experience, and a sort of also that the concert is more than a sum of its parts all of a sudden, because you have this collective listening to one thing, and through that there is a multiplication also in the experience and also in the energy flow that comes back to us. I have to say, when I play, and I don't do that so much anymore, but in the beginning I was playing a lot of live broadcasts on Facebook or on YouTube, and I felt exhausted afterwards because I didn't feel sort of the reflux of the energy coming back from an audience. I got nice comments, but that was more like an intellectual pleasure than really an emotional feedback, so to speak. I don't know if you had the similar experiences.
Well, I haven't done any streaming, and I'm not planning on it because I since I'm playing the cello, I never liked microphones. I mean, to play for a microphone makes me play, or used to make me play 10 times worse. I mean, I could play a concert, that's fine, and once I go into the studio and play, I'm half as good, or even. And it took me a while to overcome that and pretend there is an audience when I record something. So now I'm handling it all right. But to sit in my room and play, and I don't know. And the first weeks of this pandemic, I was just happy that I didn't have to play. So I had some cancellations, and actually, I shouldn't say that out loud, but I had played enough the weeks before, so I was happy about the forced break. Actually, to be honest, I haven't missed it much at all. That's why I didn't do much streaming. And then when my agency came and said, "Oh, but have you heard about this Patreon thing?" which I hadn't, and they explained it to me, I thought, okay, maybe that's not a bad idea, because I shouldn't just be 100% lazy. I should do something if I want to remain a musician somehow. So to have the feeling of people paying for what I have to say, then I understand, okay, maybe somebody's really interested. Otherwise, I don't feel that. So to post something just for likes somehow, I don't mind. I likes are lovely, but it doesn't push me, lazy ass, to actually produce something. And if I know there are, whatever, now 55 people interested, then I'd rather make the effort and do something. Some people do it by themselves. It's not even the monetary thing so much, because it's little what comes in there. I could just teach, and that's probably more money. But just to for example, me learning from people like you how to do a video. I mean, I still haven't quite mastered it.
No, I think they're fantastic.
But thank you very much for all your detailed information. It was quite an eye-opener. Some things I have found online, but I couldn't believe how much work that is. And I'm actually very grateful for you telling me also that you have to work as well, because it looks so easy. But the to come to the final product, what a nightmare. I think for 5-minute video, I sometimes sit there 8 hours redoing and then trying to paste it and copy it until I found out how to. And I have a very bad memory. Somehow I forget the steps I have just mastered. And then I'm there for hours in YouTube again to try to have myself explained how that works, actually.
The videos are fantastic, and you are giving us teasers on Instagram and I think also on Facebook on small portions of the videos that you do, and then that sort of leads us to subscribe to your Patreon. And this is amazing information that you're giving. I think in our scene you were the first, and probably you remain the only one that I know that has gone to Patreon. And so that's why I was really interested in talking about this with you, because the information that you give is so detailed, and it comes from such knowledge and such professionalism, shall we say, that I'm almost surprised that it's like, wow, for €3 I can have the encyclopedia of Alban Gerhardt at my disposal, so to speak. What does it do for you personally when you come back to your own cello playing?
Well, actually, nothing. Sorry. Because I do that. I do that anyway. So I just put then the camera, and I realized, oh, I'm not really doing it good enough. So I'm preaching like, listen, and then I film myself like, oops, is that really how I'm doing it? Maybe I should stop reading the site at the same time while doing these exercises. And maybe that's what it did to me, that I practice it even more careful, because I realized, they're really good exercises. And my son actually told me I should record them, because he thought that's something to work with. And but I'm not very much, or I'm not actually consuming social media at all. When I turn on the computer, I mainly watch some sports, or Stephen Colbert or read the Zeit or some CNN. But social media, I don't. I'm there 1% if I post something, and so I don't really know what's happening. I've heard from friends that you do fantastic work with explaining things, and others as well. But you do it for free, so that's actually much better. But I couldn't bring myself. Maybe I'm just such a stingy asshole that I couldn't.
No, I don't think at all. I think, well, what I see from the outside with Patreon, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I see that these, let's say, 50 or 60 people that now have subscribed to ALBAN GERHARDT, they really are invested in you. And so if you are creating now, let's say, a super fan, or you're creating a person that really is interested in, not just by chance comes through. And so I think what it does as a benefit, at least that's how I would perceive it, is that it creates community in a very distinct and special way.
Actually, yes, and now most of the patrons are obviously cellists, but even some non-cellists like to see how we work. And I was wondering while you were talking now, isn't that what happens with the Patreon and me, for example, going there to offer stuff and get paid for? What happened also with the news media industry? Because at the beginning everything was for free, and suddenly they realized, yeah, but we cannot do that. I mean, there is a certain value to it, and if we offer it all for free, then yeah, at some point there won't be any offering anymore, because people do have to eat and feed themselves. So to give a value to what we do is not that unimportant. It doesn't mean that one has to completely overcharge now, and it should be in a way that even people who are not as blessed or who are students, that they can still afford it. But still, to say that's what I did, and it cost me so much time. I mean, the money I earned, probably if I count it down, it's maybe 50 cents per minute, or per hour. Sorry, 50 cents per hour being paid. Also, if I take into account the things I had to pay for, download some hardware and software, and obviously if that goes longer, then maybe at some point I can actually pay a dinner for it. But for me right now, it's just the incentive to come up with something, because I know people are expecting something and they deserve me to do something as they pay for it.
Right. Have you had any good experiences in the community that you've created within these people, that there was some interaction? I think you mentioned you've already given a lesson to a patron that has bought the I think the top level, where you get a lesson, and from how was that?
Well, it was my very first online teaching ever, and the very first one was horrible because both of us were not prepared. The lady, she had very bad microphone. I could not hear her. I mean, it was like, you must have run into that at some point, and it's not easy to fix that. And the other guy then bought some expensive microphones, and still the same. I mean, you really need some online tutoring, how to convince Zoom to actually turn off all the special software dealings which alter the sound constantly. But otherwise, it actually, after a while, I mean, the guy claimed that I helped him a lot. I don't know if people are being nice, but it felt actually closer than what I thought would be possible. I mean, I have never had a teaching job, but whenever I try to help somebody, it's quite hands-on. And that I had to reduce now because of the whole, it's not even Me Too thing, but yeah, the whole touching issues, people. And I agree. I mean, some people have bad experiences, so they don't want to be touched by some idiot. Even I had never meant it in any sexual way, even if I just touch here. And my sister actually said, oh, just ask them. But even asking doesn't help, because who is being honest enough to say, no, I'd rather not be touched by you? No, they will say yes, and then they silently suffer. So it's really, over the last 12 months, it came to me that, it's really a problem. I mean, I don't mind being touched, but I've never been touched in a bad way. But if somebody really had a horrible experience, or even if we just touch the elbow or the shoulder, maybe it's like, reminds them of something. Yeah. So how do you do it when you teach?
Well, find it very educational now that I have to teach all my Hochschule students over Zoom, because obviously everything that I have to say is verbally and nothing is tactile. Anyways, since the very beginning, I've made very sure that there is a very clear line in the classroom and that I don't overstep. So they have their space and I have my space. And I think that's okay. I think that is just what we have to deal with. And I don't even know if pushing down really helps so much. It helped me a lot when I was a kid, but of course it was my father that was pressing down my shoulders and just putting me into the right place. I was wondering, since you are so great with communicating your knowledge and you have such a wonderful system in place, was teaching never something that was attractive for you?
Well, somehow I have always loved teaching, and never mind public or in private. I have hardly ever taught. I mean, the private lessons I have given in my life probably I can count on one hand. But in public, I loved it because it turned into some stand-up sometimes, and I. But it's not that I made a show. It was fun to teach somebody, and I never ever made fun of the person playing, making fun rather of myself, and people like me putting myself down. I try to break the ice, and the breaking ice seemed to have a funny response from the audience. So I like that aspect from the teaching, which actually had nothing to do with the teaching. But it's also, it did, the few times I did masterclass, it did challenge my own playing and thinking sometimes, and it made myself become more aware of what I do musically or technically. At the same time, once I got asked if I wanted a job, and I was considering it. My old teacher actually wanted me to apply for his job in Berlin. And then he sent a student my way. And the student, we had made a date, and then he canceled it, and then we rescheduled. And I remember I was cooking something in the kitchen, and he was supposed to come. And he didn't come. And I got happier and happier, because then I had more time to cook, and then 2 hours later he called, I guess. He said he completely forgot, and I said, oh no, don't worry, it's completely fine. I've never seen that guy until today. But my relief when he didn't show up told me something. So, well, actually I applied for the same job you did. When was that? That was like 8 years ago?
In Köln?
Yeah.
Okay. But you didn't take the audition.
I sent my application, and then they called me for a date. I don't know, it was December 23 or so. Strange. Well, I couldn't, and then there was never another date, so I never got to travel there, which also was a big relief. I exactly as you said, I felt I should do it because I'm older now and to share. Actually, a colleague of yours, not a cello colleague, but a string player, he met with me, and he asked me if I wanted to apply, and I said, no, actually not. And he said, why not? Well, I was honest. I said, well, I'm a bit annoyed how cello is being played these days. It's for me too much in the same direction. And then he said, well, then it's a good idea to teach. Then you can change the direction. And that somehow convinced me to apply, but not enough to actually insist. So until until today, as I said, I'm very lazy. So I love the free time, and I don't love cello very much, to be honest. And once I don't know, have you sat in juries of competitions?
Yeah, terrible. Yeah.
I've done it once, and actually I swore to myself never to do it again. Then this lovely man who runs the Casals Foundation, or who plans the concerts of the Casals Foundation in El Vendrell, he asked me if I wanted to do Queen Elizabeth, and I was like, oh. I talked to my managers, and they said, yeah, but this guy is doing it, and this guy is doing it, you should do it as well. I said, okay, I do it. Then he committed the big mistake, or maybe the big blessing, to invite me for some little mini competition where I had to sit for 3 hours. It was lovely. I mean, Helmerson was there, 2 other cellists. We had the most wonderful time listening for 3 hours to 6 cellists. It was really fantastic. And the jury talking afterwards was great too. And after that, I told the guy, count me out. Because 3 hours of listening to cello, there was plenty. I don't need 10 hours for 2 weeks. I think I would go insane. As I had in the only competition I had judged before, where I think 8 times Kodai was played. And I couldn't believe 8 times I heard that first movement, and not anybody, they more or less played it all quite similar, completely off the track. And in the same way off the track. So it was not everybody came with his own off the track. It seemed to be the same off the track for the same piece by 8 different people. I took a book out and started reading at some point, because I had to get my attention off this meaningless cello playing I had accounted in that setting. So no competitions for me anymore. Who knows? Maybe one day I need to, because I need the money. But right now,
right now we're safe. It was actually interesting that you mentioned this sort of off-track Kodai playing, because I think one of the, at least accounting to our Twitter exchange, one things that we are passionate about is when it comes to the Elgar concerto, to actually look in the score rather than following the also wonderful traditions that are out there. And it seems to me that it is very common in a lot of cello pieces to sort of find one version, put it on the pedestal, and everybody has to go towards that. I don't know if that's the same thing for other instruments. I feel like maybe because pianists and violinists have more repertoire, maybe this sort of one version thing doesn't seem to be such an issue, but maybe you know more than me.
I know much more than you, because I'm so much older. I think it's in music general. I mean, obviously we are more blown away because we listen to Elgar concerto by students many times, or we hear it in the radio whenever. But if you think of symphonies, there's a standard version. I mean, a Brahms symphony. Once, I will never forget, I was in Stockholm, and the Swedish Chamber Orchestra was doing Brahms 3, a piece I had played a couple of times in the second half when I sat in. And each time I sit there and I play and I think, what's going on? I mean, Brahms was such a wonderful composer, and if he wanted twice as slow, or if he wanted a huge retard, he would have indicated a little bit something. But not every tranquillo means go half speed. So this one performance, it was with Thomas Dausgaard and the Swedish Chamber Orchestra.
Yeah.
And they completely cut the crap. It was the most raw performance of Brahms 3 I've ever heard. And maybe it was breathless at times, but yeah, that's what Brahms wanted in that moment. And people think this Brahms with a beard and this big guy with a cigar or something. Maybe some people even have in mind his little voice when he talked. But he was at some point a young man, and he had a lot of unfulfilled wishes, so there's no need to play Brahms like with this gravitas all the time. And maybe that was not the last performance of that, but I was so grateful to have heard that piece once, as Brahms had actually put it into the score. And from there you can take it, and I don't mind rubatos, but if every rubato is the same, then it's not rubato anymore, it's just bad rhythm.
Since you say it's more a general thing in music, do you think that comes because there's so little rehearsal time, so we all just have to agree to a certain standard to make it through? I mean, you know it too, like we get maybe, if we're lucky, we get a whole rehearsal. If it's like always, we get half a rehearsal because the symphony didn't finish and all that. And how much time is there to reinvent the wheel? You know?
Well, it's probably not even the rehearsal time. It's really rather this people coming to their knowledge from just listening. People don't get the knowledge from scores. Oh, shall I tell you a really mean story?
Please do.
With no names? Really wonderful, great conductor. Gets attacked a lot by the press. And one quite well-known, it's all happened in Germany. I don't say the nationalities of the people involved, but happened in Germany. And this conductor did a Brahms symphony, and the critic wrote, well, the guy didn't understand the architecture of the piece at all. Happens that the conductor sees the journalist in the foyer of some famous hall, and he asked him into his room, and he says, well, I read your review, and I understand you had some complaints about me not understanding the architecture, and especially in the last movement, I would really love you to point that out to me. Here's the score. And the guy gets all fiddly and then the conductor says, oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You don't read music. Oh, I didn't want to embarrass you. No, it's fine. Thank you very much. So that's a second.
That's a true story.
It's a true story. Yeah. I mean, some friend of the conductor told me, and the friend is not a bad mouth. And I know the journalist in question, and I can and I don't want to. I mean, there are wonderful journalists out there, but some really have their musical knowledge from listening to recordings, and a recording is just tradition, and tradition is, as Mahler said, the last verse performance. Or he said also the tradition is Schlamperei, whatever, how you can translate that. It's carelessness.
But Boulez said that tradition is laziness, so I think there are many opinions.
Well, then he translated the Mahler quote. The Mahler quote is Schlamperei, and Schlamperei is a way of laziness, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In a way. Mm-hmm. So if you expect a certain way the piece to be performed, then if it's suddenly missing, you think the guy got it wrong, but they're not asking themselves if maybe they don't even know how the piece really goes. And it's so sad, because if I go to a performance, I don't want to hear what I'm used to hear. I want to be surprised. And I don't need the reaffirmation that what I thought was right is right.
Yeah, I was following, speaking of journalists, some interactions you had when you were passionately and much to my admiration, passionately going out and speaking for Europe and speaking for like the European idea and how it is, basically kicked around by certain protagonists at the moment. Where has that gone for you now? I mean, now that Brexit is sort of a done deal.
Well, my oldest sister, she's 3 years younger than me. She is the biggest political and environmental activist I know. She is for rebellion extinction.
Okay.
And she bought her piece of rainforest when she was 12 years old. She has always completely obsessed is the wrong word, because she's right. I'm the opposite. So when I went out there, because I really felt somehow threatened and afraid before the French election, I really did it because a journalist challenged me. He said, well, why don't the musicians join forces? And I said, well, I'm the wrong guy to talk to, because I don't have many friends and I'm not very well connected, and I'm just little me. You should ask Ansofie Mutter. She can rather bring people together. And then he said, no, well, I give you the address of Ansofie Mutter. You contact her. He told me. So then I thought I took the challenge and I tried to do it. But it's not me. I'm really not an activist. And then when one rather well-known journalist attacked me in my favorite paper, Die Zeit, the first time I've ever appeared in Die Zeit was for being attacked of something which, I mean, I take criticism very well, and I listen, and I realized, and she was not meaning bad, she just thought I did it out of publicity reasons.
Right.
And when I felt that, actually it turned me away already, because it really meant something, and then to be accused of using that for my own personal benefit, it took a bit the juice out of the whole thing. Because by then, I mean, we had housed refugees for 1.5 years in our place, so I really meant what I was talking about. Maybe different to some musicians she mistook me for. I mean, there are musicians who are doing a lot, but finally you might question, is that really to change something? I mean, I'm just thinking of one wonderful performer whom I asked to join us, and who's very prolific, to very outspoken for Europe, and he never replied. So I thought, oh, maybe it's more about him, herself, than about the real thing, because if he meant it, then he would have joined us since if we are all together, really, we could have done much more. But musicians, and this is what I told the journalist at the very beginning, we musicians, we are, especially soloists, we're turning around ourselves. I mean, to join forces is not in our DNA, I guess. Because yeah, when we have to practice and we travel, and it's not even necessarily this, but it's a lonely job. And I'm also doing this lonely job since 30 years because I've always been a loner. That's why I never joined any kind of chamber music group. That's why I never taught, because I'm so happy being alone. Now I was 3 months with my family, whom I love to pieces, but now to be here for a week in the most gorgeous city in the world, it's like alone at last. Really, as a child, and it's embarrassing to say, but I hardly ever went out. I read a lot of books. I played with Smurfs until I was 12 or 13. I had a Smurf football league. I still have the papers. I was a huge soccer fan, and well, I was a track and field person, but I couldn't play soccer. But I loved soccer, so I played it with Smurfs. What an idiot! And I had 5 siblings, or we are 5 siblings, so it was quite contained. I mean, a bit, not a bit, very nerdy and very geeky, but it's a geeky profession in a way, and that's why learning all this with this camera there, it's quite a new thing, and it's at the same time exciting. Actually, I love the video editing. It's to come up with a little.
It's cool, no? Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, just to close the subject, I felt you were very unfairly treated by this journalist, and I feel like if there is some sort of snobbishness, I find especially in Germany, is when you try to do something good or try to stand up for a good cause, people are always suspicious. What are they trying to put themselves in front? In the US, that would never happen. Like, if you are standing up for a cause, people were like, "Can we give you money? Like, can we support your cause?" You know.
Yeah.
So it's a very specifically. I don't know if it's just Central European or if it's a German thing. But anyways, I thought it was a fantastic initiative that you did. Speaking of nerdiness, just one cello question. I am of such admiration that you premiere your works by memory, and that regularly leads to my brain to explode. That Unsuk Chin and Brett Dean you mentioned. Does it come naturally to you? Is it something where you have a strategy to memorize? How does it stick?
Well, I've always played everything by heart. Etudes and as a child. When I grew up, it was normal to play everything by heart, and in the 10, 20 years since, much less so. The art. I mean, somebody posted on Facebook a couple of years ago the rules of violin playing from 1905 or so. It was like good sound, good intonation, blah blah blah, like 10 rules, and one of the rules was playing by heart. It was like as important as playing in tune. So that's what I grew up with. To play by heart was like the most normal thing. I don't think it should be. If somebody doesn't have a good memory or gets too nervous, he should put the music. For me personally, I just play much better if I really own the piece, which is also why I don't like to play chamber music that much anymore, because there I don't go through the hassle of memorizing, and then I feel I don't know the piece. I can practice as much as I want. If I don't know it by heart, it's still I depend on that thing there. Yeah. And I mean, many people play by heart. With the world premieres, again, I feel I can help the piece better if I really force myself to learn it. Like now with both, in Unsuk Chin and Brett Dean, and also Anderson, I counted hours, how long it took me to learn it. Because people always ask, not always, but some kids ask, how long did it take you to learn the piece? And I could never give a good answer. So I thought, when learning the chin, I thought, okay, now I really count. So I did like the little, and it actually took me 100 hours until I had memorized it somewhat. Since then I have practiced many more hours. But for the first step that I knew it by heart was about 100 hours. Brett Dean, which is much easier, was 50 hours. And I think Anderson, even easier, 40 hours. And I do have a special technique which I will do a post on Patreon, so I won't give it all away. Rubinstein Concerto, when I recorded it and the contract didn't come for longest time. So I thought, nah, I'm not really learning it. And then before the recording, a week before the recording, they sent the contract and I said, okay, now I have to learn it. And I did it with that technique. And within a week, I did the recording by heart. This is really, I mean, it's romantic music.
Wow.
That's easy to put in the brain. But my first GTU was, I don't know, 15 years ago. They asked me a month, there was a replacement. They asked me a month before. And my ex-wife had just told me about that technique. So I thought, oh, I might as well try it. And if it doesn't work, I put the music. So what? It really worked. In a month, I had that piece memorized. The technique somehow uses the subconscious and the conscious, and because I don't have photographic memory. It's really...
I was wondering about that, yeah.
No, I'd love to, but... Oh, actually, something about photographic memory. I love to play tennis. I'm really bad, but I loved it. And I had in Berlin this tennis partner, a lady who was also a priest, a bassoon and a flute player. And she asked me, so how do you memorize? And I told you my whole spiel and stick and whatever. And she looked at me and said, oh, that's interesting, because I have photographic memory. And I told her, well, why do you ask me then? And she said, because photographic memory is cheating. It's not playing by heart. You're reading it still. She said she has a horrible time to really learn something by heart. Photographic memory is really, you just have it there. You see, you still have to flip the pages, you still have to... So actually, all these conductors with the photographic memory, they don't necessarily know it by heart. That's why I love, in the English language, to know something by heart is different than to just have memorized it. Knowing by heart is really inside out. You penetrate the whole piece. Well, you have to practice twice as much. Like the Dean, after 25 hours, I knew the piece. I could have performed it. But then I kept on going for 25 more hours until it really was there. So that always helps if you practice it something a little more, especially if you're lazy like me. The other day I saw somebody posting something, how he practiced, and I thought, that's how people practice. Like, repeat. Like, no, what a waste of time. I couldn't bring myself to repeat something that much. If it doesn't work the first time, I analyze it and then it has to work. If not, oh God, I did something completely wrong. But this, also I'm afraid that if you do the eternal repeating, that you become in the way of playing a bit stale, because if the same, and this guy was playing the same passage over and over, exactly the same articulation also. There was very little flexibility. So I could imagine if he plays it in concert and it happened to be Bach, it would be exactly the same way how he did it. So no, I think practicing shouldn't.
Well, maybe this kind of practicing leads to exactly the complaint that you had before, that in general, like, pieces are performed in one way and people don't really allow in their practice to have, in German we have this wonderful word Durchlässigkeit, to have some sort of fluidity in the interpretation, right? I mean, to go this way or to go this way.
Yes, some spontaneity that you go. I think we can learn a lot from jazz musicians. I mean, the jazz musicians, they don't really make up all that much, but they have, the better they are, the more little Versatzstücke, the more little, how would you say
patterns.
Sorry?
Patterns, probably.
Little patterns. And the better they are, the smaller and the more, so maybe 1,000 patterns, and then they can adjust them quickly. And it seems as if they're just making it up in the moment, but actually no, they're just using... And now I have to play the Bach tonight, and I feel my brain needs to be really sharp, because I have to remember what I did. And I'm not the greatest jazz, I'm not a jazz musician whatsoever. I'm not the greatest musician whatsoever either. But I have some patterns, but in order to use them, I really have to be so fresh. So if I'm running out of concentration, I get stale. So also my recording, when I recorded the Bach, the focus for the microphone and trying to be spontaneous, not a not a great thing. I was not, with half of it, I was really, really unhappy. I remember sitting there in the, listening to the first edit and like, oh no, I played it like that 5 times? How can that be? But at some point you want to get it right, and then you, no, it's Bach for me is by far the worst to play and to teach. I hate teaching Bach. Also, I'm not so good with words. I mean, you have to be, and some people are so eloquent, and I'm not. And if people don't feel the need of coming up with something new, then I don't want to tell them do something new. No, it should be like in your blood to not say the same thing twice. Otherwise, it gets so boring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I wonder, because I haven't recorded the Bach suites for good reason, because I feel I have very little to contribute to the already great landscape of recordings that is out there.
Same here.
But I feel like coming with solo music where you want to be spontaneous, it's probably very hard to edit something together that has like 10 different characters after each other, and you're like, well, there is one great idea and there's another great idea, but how do we glue them together?
Awful. Yeah. It comes to mind the jig of the 4th suite, where I really had lots of wonderful ideas, but they were impossible to put together. And then it wasn't always perfect, because I really, now my trick how to record is just to think it's a concert. So I play full movement, and by then I was really tired. It was the whole suite, and for me that's the hardest for sure.
It is, yeah.
Actually, which is the reason I only play since 35 years one key in the scale. Each day when I practice E flat major. I never...
Is that right?
Yeah. Scale and arpeggios, and it's all E flat major, because it's the worst key. And back then, when I was 14 or 15, I learned the 4th suite, and my teacher said, it's the worst key for cello. And that was like, okay, it was the worst key that's I'm going to stick to for the rest of my life. And I still haven't mastered it. But for example, I mean, I'm not a big fan of echo effect, like da-da-da-da-dan, da-da-da-da-dan.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to do it. And in the recording, I didn't do it at all. It's like, come on, one echo effect. So in my attempt to not be too predictable, I suddenly forgot the norm, and very annoying. And you find out far too late, when already the sessions are over half a year. But I almost went back to the studio because I said, no, at least once do da-da-da-da-dan, because it's nice. I mean, there's nothing bad about echo. It just becomes annoying if there's nothing else. I remember once I jumped in for somebody with some funny concerto. Reicher. And well, it's positive, so I can say the name. Janowski was conducting, and he worked the orchestra so well. I think we had 2 hours rehearsal on that little early classic piece. It became a highlight. He really triggered them, and he had them really go for it. Obviously, it was not Baroque style, but no, he had good phrasing and everything. So then it didn't matter. They vibrated maybe a bit more than they needed to, but it had so much fire. And whenever I play a Haydn concerto, I tell the conductors, please, no fake Baroque.
I find it interesting because you're absolutely right. The Baroque playing has evolved so much, and it turns out to be now a rather modern technique. Yeah, I'm not sure if the people at the time of Bach or Reicher or Haydn, I mean, they must have been fantastic players, but I don't know if they really had the expertise that we have today about all. I mean, how would a person in Köthen know what is going on in Eisenstadt, or what is going on in Esterhazy? You know, I mean, how would messages travel? Probably with a delay of a year. You know, and it's not like there is like a new thing coming up and we know immediately all about it, right? So I think the ubiquity of information that we have now leads us, of course, to a very specific modern style of playing Baroque music.
Yeah, and very, in a way, one-dimensional, as you mentioned. Every little Landkreis probably played in a different way, to the extent that in Italy the tuning was 445 or even was very high.
Really? I didn't know that.
Andrea Marcon told me. I mean, I never worked with him, but I had talked to him 15, 20 years ago. I mean, unless I'm going crazy. But I'm quite sure he said that Vivaldi was 440, something even higher. And in Germany, it was 415. So to play Vivaldi in 415 would be wrong, actually. Not talking about vibrato and all that. I mean, definitely, you must have played on a Baroque cello before. I can, on a Baroque cello with gut string and a Baroque bow, I can play very much legato. I mean, you can do, maybe it was not the sound ideal, but the instruments could do more than just do.
What I found most rewarding playing on gut strings is that I rediscovered my right shoulder. I was like, suddenly I have to work a lot. It's not just like putting the bow on the string, but you have to be very agile. That was very, very educational, I found.
Well, it does help the modern playing for sure. But do you travel sometimes with a Baroque cello, or do you own one?
No, never. No,
I'm too lazy.
I tried once and I failed so miserably in performance because I just couldn't identify myself with what was coming out. I just felt it were not my vocal cords, and I was also not investing enough time, which I think you have. I mean, this is not something you pick up on a Monday and you perform on a Friday. I mean, it's something that you live with for a while, and just like you, I mean, to travel most of the time and then maybe have another instrument with you just to get to know it, it's hard. Yeah, it's very hard.
I admire the colleagues who do it, but it's, for me... Well, actually, I don't know if you read the book by Arnoncourt, Musik als Klangsprache. At some point, I mean, many wonderful things in it, but at some point he says, at the end of the day, the equipment doesn't matter as long as the music speaks. So that I took as a Persil-Schein, as the carte blanche to play on a modern bow with steel strings, just trying to make the music speak. If it works, I don't know, but at least I don't have to schlep another cello around.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time to talk, and it was absolutely a delight.
Well,
Thank
lovely
you so
talking
much.
to you, Johannes.